Get ready for a fun and spooky dive into your favorite monster's morality.
Welcome to Hotel Transylvania!
We're ranking all the characters from the entire Hotel Transylvania series from good to evil. And as usual, we'll be starting with the most pleasant guests and working our way down to the most evil. These characters are the good. And the gold medal of good was no easy choice, but we decided to give it to the legend himself, Blobby. In a world where the majority of monsters are surprisingly friendly, there were a lot of contenders for our top spot. But Blobby takes the cake / gelatin. He's always there to help out, even when he's not properly appreciated. In the second movie, the guys literally leave him stranded in a lake for hours, only calling when they need some transportation. And he still shows up in mere moments without hesitation in their time of need.
You have to go now?
If his friendliness wasn't enough, Blobby is also a great father. When he somehow has a son in the third movie, he takes good care of him. When his balloon animal pops, he replaces it with a blobby little puppy, which is as adorable as it is sweet. On top of fathering a child, he's also able to father a church, since he officiated a wedding at the start of the movie, implying that he is an ordained minister. So Blobby is the manifestation of all that is good and blobby in the world. And I'm 100% down to have him officiate my wedding someday. In a close runner-up position, we have Winnie Werewolf, Dennis's best friend and potential zing. Winnie has been one of the MVPs since the first movie. Her only appearance there was as the literal one of the werewolf children who still retained some level of respect for her parents, at which point she used her sense of smell to track down Johnny.
I drove through town to the airport.
From then on out, she remained a loyal companion to Dennis, always playing with him, staying beside him when he's upset, and protecting him from anyone who would dare approach him with anything but the utmost kindness. And on that note, let's talk about Dennis. As the son of Mavis and Johnny, this little guy plays the biggest role in his debut appearance, in which Dracula repeatedly places him in terrifying, dangerous situations to see if he's a vampire or a human. We'll get to his morally questionable traits later, of course, but Dennis is pretty innocent. He's a sweet kid who just wants to spend time with his family, be them human or monster. It's also worth noting that he'll go to some pretty intense lengths to protect his loved ones, shown by how his vampire / bat powers are awakened when Winnie is in danger. The worst you could say about Dennis is just the most absolutely tame misbehavior you could expect from a kid, like trying to sneak his puppy on board a cruise. If that's the worst thing you've done in your life, you're doing pretty great. Landing just outside of our top 3 is one of the series' main heroes, Mavis Dracula. She's a college-aged plus 100-aged vampire who wants to explore the world outside of her dad's giant hotel. Mavis is proof that in this universe, monsters are generally nothing to be afraid of. When she visits a human village on her 118th birthday, she greets every person she sees with a friendly face. And this sense of compassion and acceptance is pretty much the core of her whole character.
You're my age?
Sure. Oh, well, how old are you?
Whether it's for her family or some random gas station worker. I mean, really, when you think about it, her love for Johnny got the ball rolling for Dracula to slowly but surely learn to accept humans, and furthermore, for monsters and humans to live in harmony once again. All of that doesn't even scratch the surface of how supportive she is of her husband and son, both of whom she cherishes with all her heart, and despite how many ludicrous mistakes Drac has made, she's always looking out for him too. The guy messes a lot of stuff up, but his daughter was not one of them, as Mavis is a gem. And the apple didn't fall too far from the tree either. Up next is Martha, Drac's deceased wife. While Dracula's human hatred can be pretty severe, you can't forget that it is rather justified. When some humans discovered a couple of vampires living in their neighborhood, they decided the only logical course of action was to murder them. Martha not only was willing to lay down her life to allow Drac and Mavis to live a full one, but she thought even further ahead too, creating a beautifully illustrated storybook about her and Dracula's zing for Mavis's 118th year birthday, teaching her and reminding Drac of the importance of cherishing the love you're lucky enough to find. With that, let's move on to one of the humans who helped stop interspecies racism, Johnny. Johnny is one of those season 1 Patrick Star types of characters. He's pretty dense, sure, but he occasionally has some surprising moments of emotional wisdom that come out of absolutely nowhere. In the first movie, we see him at his best when he's willing to sacrifice his feelings for Mavis so she won't be hurt by him leaving after her birthday party.
You're a monster, and I hate monsters.
while Mavis immediately and correctly recognizes this is Drax's doing. It still shows that Johnny's able to place others' feelings above his own, and that facet of his character is consistent throughout the movies, shown by how he always helps the people around him become more kind and marshmallow-like. But while Johnny is, in fact, the marshmallow, he's not without his faults. Most notably in the final movie, Transylvania. Van Helsing's machine goes haywire and turns Johnny into a continually mutating dragon who begins to lose sight of himself, thrown into sheer rage when he discovers that Dracula lied to him about why he wouldn't give him and Mavis the hotel. This was a low point for Johnny, but his anger was understandable, and at a certain point, he couldn't really control himself anymore. He could, however, control himself when he decided to help Dracula endanger Dennis behind Mavis's back so he could grow his fangs. Luckily, his possession of the Darwin Cinder Medal led to him revealing the secret anyway. While he's definitely a good guy, he is the first character we can really say anything bad about, so we have to place him just outside of our top 5. But fret not, we'd never be cold-hearted enough to separate him from Johnny's backpack. Sure, it's a backpack of few words, actually of no words, but this backpack is dear enough to Johnny for him to consider him the best man at his wedding. I have no idea if Johnny has some deep sentimental reason for loving his backpack so much, but it's honestly way funnier if there's no reason at all, so we'll just leave it here. Surprisingly, Johnny isn't the only human in the good category. Enter the Monster Fest humans. If Johnny and Mavis got the ball rolling on changing Drax's mind about humanity, these guys sent it all the way to the end of the lane. These are just a bunch of people who love monsters, and when they discover that they've encountered the real Dracula, they don't hesitate to help him find Johnny before it's too late by shielding him from the sun. That's some serious generosity for someone who's not just a vampire, but a vampire they didn't even know personally.
There's only one way, blah, blah, blah.
I do not say blah, blah, blah.
For every human who will murder their neighbors for being different, there are plenty more who would use their own cloaks to shield them from the sun. And that's a really heartwarming thing to see. Dana, the director, is one of the less traditional vampires in the series, but we have to give him some credit regardless. As the leading camp counselor, he takes a lot of pride in his work and does all he can to keep the kids safe.
Hokey pokey. See you at the campfire.
When he discovers that Dracula not only destroyed his camp, but endangered Dennis's life without even knowing if he was a vampire or not, he rightfully prepared to call the authorities. Vampire or not, being courageous enough to defy Count Dracula himself is pretty noble, so props to you, Dana. He might be lower than some other characters, but make no mistake, Tinkles is a very good boy. He's also a very big boy, which admittedly makes him look more threatening than he is in all seriousness. But that's okay. What this puppy lacks in carefulness, he more than makes up for in sheer love and affection. Not to mention how cooperative he can be, as long as he's well fed. And speaking of which, we have to give him the Gluttony Cinder Medal for that. While Tinkles is usually friendly, the more skeletal guests of the hotel would do well to keep their distance from him. I mean, that's just straight up body horror. This is some Attack on Titan level dread. Poor guys. On the topic of skeletons, we have to give a shout out to Skeleton Man. Given that he doesn't even have a name, you can probably infer that he doesn't have a major role in the series, but we wanted to shout him out anyway on the sole basis that he's always sticking up for his wife. Whether it's telling a curious human to keep his hands out of her, or telling off Dracula for invading her shower by accident, this guy has a bone to pick with anyone who disrespects his wife, and we respect that. Another unnamed entry. Next, we have to give the fish cruise workers a quick mention. Hailing from the third movie, these guys are a pretty simple bunch. They just want to give their customers a delightful time on the cruise they paid for, waiting on them hand and foot however the need arises. Quality customer service is important, and while they don't do it with a smile on their face, at least I don't think that's a smile, it's done with a lot of politeness. Now everybody give a hand, and a foot, and a head, and any body parts you have to spare for our next character, Frankie. As a close friend of Dracula, Frankie is an all-around decent guy. Sure, he's implied to have a bit of a gambling habit, and more than a bit of an ego, for the latter of which will give him the Pride Cinder Medal. In the fourth movie, when Van Helsing's invention turns him handsome, he takes that newfound appearance and runs with it.
What's up, fellas?
But as full of himself as he can be, Frankie's the kind of celebrity who always treats his fans with respect, and additionally, he's always there when his loved ones need him. He'll even rub sunscreen on his wife's back while his hands are detached from his body. And closing out our good section, we have Murray the Mummy. Similarly to Frankie, Murray is a decent guy and a good friend of Drax. whose faults don't really extend beyond regular sins. We will have to give Murray the Lust Sinner medal for the sheer fact that he's pretty flirtatious with the ladies, although he does treat them respectfully. But at the end of the day, Murray is another guy who will put himself in harm's way for the sake of his friends, and while he is flawed, none of his flaws are enough to push him into neutral territory. But with that said, it is time for us to move on to the characters who have more questionable moral compasses. This is the gray area. And we kick off this category with Wayne's better half, Wanda Werewolf. She isn't in the gray area for any egregious misdeeds or anything, but rather for being one of the more indifferent characters. I'll always sympathize with how much Wayne and Wanda have to deal with, considering how rambunctious their kids are, but Wanda is one of those fictional moms who seems like she'd be happier if she didn't even have kids sometimes. Now we have the man who ruined all of the internet's fanfictions about him with just one face reveal, Invisible Man. Yeah, remember when the internet got really mad at this movie for the fact that he looked like Mort Goldman from Family Guy? Good times. Like Wanda, he's one of the more indifferent characters in the series. He's nice enough, save for the occasional prank, even if it is pretty weird that he hangs around his friends naked most of the time.
I was just in the pool. The water's cold. Don't judge me!
Of course, there was the scene in Transylvania where he was willing to leave Blobby behind in a sinking boat to save himself, which could be the second time he's almost had a hand in Blobby's side in the series. Not cool, Mort. I mean, Invisible Man. But let's talk about the shrunken heads. Perhaps more so than anyone else in these movies, they're the embodiment of just doing my job. Instead of do not disturb signs, Dracula prefers to use sassy shrunken heads.
Oh, it's you. Glad you could make it.
On one hand, they'll roast you without a second thought, but on the other hand, they'll totally call you out if you're doing something wrong, particularly if your name rhymes with Mount Pracula. Next, we have a quick mention for Johnny's parents. Think of these two as, you ever met one of those people where they aren't very prejudiced, but they're not as not prejudiced as they think they are? That's these two. They're generally friendly enough, aside from the occasional snide remark from Linda. Calling humans normal is kind of insensitive, but they make an effort to accept Mavis into the family and make her feel welcome, as misguided as they can be. There are many fathers in Hotel Transylvania, but none of them have their work cut out for them as much as Wayne Werewolf. Wayne is the father of... he's got a lot of werewolf babies. Like Wanda, he's naturally exhausted by them a good bit, to the point where he seems disappointed when the daycare staff in the third movie tells him they will, in fact, be getting their children back at the end of the day. While he struggles to raise his kids, he's still ultimately a decent guy, always willing to help Dracula and his other friends out with whatever they need. Of course, then there's the matter of why he's in the gray area, which circles back around to his family. In Transylvania, when he's turned into a human, he takes the opportunity to hide from his kids and knowingly leave his wife to do all the work. While it's the only major misdeed he has throughout the films, it's enough to call his family values into question and earn him the Sloth Sinner medal as well. The werewolves might need some couples counseling after that incident. Now, without further ado, let's give a hearty blah 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 to the main character himself, Count Dracula. Drac was a difficult character to play since he's one of those characters who has a lot going both for and against him. On one hand, Drac is one of the most altruistic monsters in the series. He built the hotel as a means of protecting Mavis and monster kind, providing what he hoped to be a safe haven from humanity. Despite his initial prejudice towards humanity, he comes around and eventually accepts them once Mavis falls in love with one, finding out that neither humans nor life itself are so bad. He's done a lot of generous good deeds, even down to saving Abraham Van Helsing from falling to his death in the third movie, despite him spending over a century trying to kill him. Unfortunately, Drac is one of those characters whose good deeds are just about balanced out by his bad ones. He has a serious lying problem and will go to some pretty extreme lengths to avoid change. This is a factor in 3 out of the 4 movie's core conflicts, from brainwashing Mavis into a state of human prejudice, to lying about why he refused to pass the hotel down to her and Johnny, all the way to his performance in the second movie, which included multiple counts of child endangerment and destruction of property.
That's a very unsafe tower. You're lucky we don't call the authorities.
He always makes up for his misdeeds, but the fact that he's consistently willing to tell lies and endanger his loved ones, to varying degrees per movie, keeps us from ranking him any higher. Next, we have Frankie's not really better half, Eunice. As Frankie's wife, she deals with no shortage of antics from him. As a result, you can't really blame her for being a little bit exhausted. The thing is, she's more than a little exhausted. Anytime she's on screen, you can safely bet that she's going to be nagging Frankie or one of his friends about something.
They're vicious, and they're very loud!
She's not a bad person by any means, but she's just kinda doing her own thing, really. If there's one character or group of characters the idea of doing your own thing applies to more, it's definitely the werewolf babies. These creatures are vicious, thoughtless beasts. In other words, they're toddlers. Sure, they're not malicious. I don't even think you can be malicious at that age. But their lack of respect and restraint means they're still among the least good of the series' ensemble cast. Next, we have the biggest monster in the series, the Kraken. Honestly, it's hard to really gauge this guy's moral compass since it seems like his character depends on what music he's surrounded by. When we first meet him, he sings a happy song to welcome the gang to Atlantis, but when Van Helsing enacts his evil plan, he becomes a mindless killing machine. Thankfully, when Johnny teaches the rest of the crews to do the Macarena, the Kraken calms down and turns against his master, saving the day at last. But from one giant to the next up is Gigi. He may look unassuming and adorable, and that's because he is. Well, for the most part. But it turns out that mutating him into a monster will lead to some serious destruction of property. It's one of those moments where a kid's movie has some real wisdom. Never pump your pet guinea pig full of steroids. Nearing the end of the gray area, we have one of the most important characters in the series, the elderly gremlin who didn't do that. She's constantly causing a ruckus, from eating a friend's winning bingo card to eating Johnny's scooter to, worst of all, eating little Dennis's whole birthday cake right in front of him. But the worst part about her is her gaslighting. The moment you call her on her behavior, she hits you with that iconic line.
I didn't do that.
Still, aside from being mischievous, we wouldn't say she's evil. At least she makes us laugh, so that's good for something. Drax's second zing, Erica Van Helsing, is up next. As the granddaughter of Abraham Van Helsing, she was raised to believe that monsters were pure, disgusting evil.
I won't try and kill him. I will kill him.
And she believed that for a long time, to the point where Abraham had to stop her from trying to kill Dracula right off the bat, pun intended. But as she spends more time with him, she slowly finds herself developing feelings for the monsters, some more romantic than others, and ultimately she finds the courage to defy her grandfather to help save the hotel gang from destruction. Of course, this was primarily motivated by her falling in love with Drac, but regardless of the means, she still had enough courage to overcome the beliefs she was raised under and become a better person. She even uses her old monster-killing machine in Transformania to help track down Dracula and Johnny, proving herself to be a full-on hero to monster kind. And just barely, narrowly missing out on falling into full-on villain territory, we have Vlad Dracula. And when I say narrowly, I mean very, very narrowly. His prejudice makes Drax look absolutely pleasant and tame in comparison. And even without taking that into account, he was more than willing to traumatize Johnny to help him grow his fangs. That's a seriously cruel move, but to his credit, once he realizes how much he upset both Dennis and Mavis, he has sincere remorse and helps find the former. He proves to have a change of heart in the end when he narrowly stops Bella from killing Johnny, threatening him to never come near him or his family again. And if all that isn't enough, he has some of the absolute sickest dance moves in the universe. But with the gray section wrapped up, it's time to get to the spookiest characters in the saga. These are the bad and the evil. And kicking off our bottom 5, we have the first movie's villainous duo of Quasimodo and Esmeralda. As Dracula's chef and Dracula's chef's pet rat, respectively, these two take a lot of pride in their work. Quasimodo loves cooking to the point where he'll resort to physically abusing his employees for mistakes. There's also the detail of how he's even more dedicated to keeping the hotel human-free than Dracula is, considering how he was willing to cook and eat Johnny. And honestly, if you had to eat some humans, why not go back in time to eat those murderous humans who killed Martha? These guys were honestly sorta difficult to rank. On one hand, I don't know how comfortable I would be with literal vampires living in my neighborhood, assuming I hadn't watched Hotel Transylvania and knew that they could be friendly. But on the other hand, like, they're vampires, dude. If they wanted to hurt you, they would have done it already. But they're just living their lives, so they clearly don't want to. But you know what does make vampires want to hurt you though? Killing their wife in cold blood. The bronze medal of evil has to go to the third movie's main villain, Professor Abraham Van Helsing. Now, right off the bat, I think this guy's a pretty easy choice for the Wrath Center medal. He held a grudge against Dracula for over 100 years, devoting his entire life to killing him, and expecting his granddaughter to do the same. His determination to kill monsters extended well beyond when humans were simply afraid of them. For Helsing, it's an act of sheer prejudice and ego. To the bitter end, he was determined to murder Drac and all the other monsters, and even after Dracula saved his life, which ultimately changed his mind, he was ready to only give them a 30% refund as an apology.
Oh, all right. Full refund.
Thankfully, he's become a better person. He's no longer a speciest bounty hunter in the fourth movie, just a mad scientist who lives in a basement testing dangerous inventions on animals, which ultimately results in the hotel being destroyed and Johnny's brain almost being pulverized beyond recognition. So I guess he's making progress. But first, this video is brought to you by WickedBinge channel memberships. You can gain access to our videos early before anyone else, plus get members-only emojis and loyalty badges by supporting the channel through a membership. The silver medal of evil goes to the workers of Gremlin Airlines. Picture this: take the minions from Despicable Me, give them all cocaine, and put them in charge of an airplane company. It sounds like a horrible idea, and it is. But the workers at Gremlin Airlines, unlike the minions, are intelligent enough to fly aircraft, offer snacks and drinks, and have their own lives and families outside of work, so the fact that they're constantly endangering their clientele speaks to the fact that these critters are legitimate psychopaths. From dangling passengers out on a rope for fresh air, to pouring hot coffee on their crotches, to literally trying to crash the plane instead of just landing it.
Okay folks, you're free to move about the cabin as we have started our descent.
These creatures are absolute menaces, only saved from a lower spot by the fact that they aren't all there in the head. But taking our gold medal of evil is the one character who doesn't even have that defense: Bella, the human-hating vampire bat. As Vlad's underling in the second movie, you wouldn't be blamed for thinking he would have a similar change in behavior. But the movie actually defies expectations by having him be the truly evil villain, going out of his way to hurt humans and monsters however he pleases. What makes Bella truly despicable, however, is the fact that he was willing to hunt down Dennis and Winnie, two very small children, and basically massacre them for sheer fun.
Humans don't belong with monsters!
Even Vlad, who hated humankind with a vengeance for centuries, was disgusted by his attempt to kill both them and Johnny, and now that I think about it, the fact that he was ready to kill part of Vlad's family means he wasn't even loyal to his old friend. He's the kind of monster those humans who killed Drax's wife were afraid of, and while they may have been mistaken in their fear-blinded hatred, Bella fully knew what he was doing, and he did it proudly and happily.